Welcome. In this session of JavaScript, we are going to look at something called callback functions and higher order functions. A quick recap of functions. So functions in JavaScript are blocks of code which you can control on when to run, and you can pass some parameters or arguments, and they will return. You can expect to return what are the values you want it to return, and that's how functions work. Now, when you are passing arguments to JavaScript, one of the things you can do is you can also pass another functions as an argument. So that means now inside a function, you also have another function available. That function you can call at any point of time. So those are called callback functions. So first, the proper definition of it. So callback function is nothing but a function that is passed as an argument to another function, but you are not calling at the same point of time. That function is being called at a later point of time. Now, to give a quick demonstration, first, you need to understand there are two ways in which you can define functions in JavaScript. One, the normal way, like function hello. Let's say it has a parameter called message, and you can say console.log hello message. So this is the traditional way in which you are doing it. There is one more way where you define the function in this format. Thanks equal to function. So let's say message and console.log. Now the way in which you call the function is the same. So in the case of the hello function, you'll pass a parameter of Nupul in the message. You can do the same with the second definition also. You can say. Now, when you run this code, you can see it performs or it behaves in a similar fashion. So either you can do in this fashion, the traditional way, or you can think of a variable, and with that you can create a function. So both are almost similar. Now coming back to callback functions. So what are callback functions? So let's take a simple function called sum. So let's say we are passing two parameters. One is number 1 and number 2. You can also pass a function. For now, I'm calling that, the parameter I'm calling it with is CB, the short notation of callback. You can use any variable name, it doesn't matter, but it's a general convention. People use callback or thing. Now, what is the function that I'm going to pass here? I'm going to pass thanks when I'm calling this function. Now in this, I'm doing console.log n1 plus n2, which is the sum. After doing the sum, I will call this function with message. So now let's see how you can use this function called sum. So whenever I'm calling sum, the first parameter is a number, let's say I'm passing 2. The second is a number, which I'm passing as 3. The third is a function. It is not a variable, it's a function. So you can pass either hello or thanks. So both are the functions available you have here. So let me pass thanks over here. Now, when I run this code, you can see the thanks function is not being run here. The thanks function is being run, which is being passed as a parameter to the sum function, and it is being run at a later point of time, whenever you want, whenever you completed doing the sum. So you can see these are called callback function. You can also pass as many callback functions. So let's say you're saying hello callback. So again, this is a convention so that you know that this is a callback function, not a variable. So that's why I'm giving that CB thing. Now, in this scenario, let's say the fourth parameter you're passing as the hello function. Now, you can call it whenever you want. I'm calling this hello callback before so now you can see when I run this, we're doing hello doing, and then the sum, then it prints thanks sum complete. So basically, these functions are passed as a parameters to the sum function, and those functions are being called at your convenience or whatever the time you want to call. So this is the concept of callback functions. Why these things are used, how these things are used, you'll understand in some time. Now the next set of functions which we are going to learn are something called higher order functions. So what are higher order functions? So these are special kinds of functions which operate on other functions by taking them as arguments or returning them. Again, two technical definition. So one of the things you should understand about higher order functions are, these are some special functions which take function parameters and perform certain kind of operations in a certain way. So that's the broad thing you need to understand. As you work on these higher order functions, you will tend to understand. Now, the first higher order function we are going to look at is for each. Okay. Now, typically when you have an array, what happens? Mainly you are iterating in that array, performing certain operation on each and every element of that array, or performing a certain set of instructions on each and every element of that array. So instead of doing that, using for each, you can run a function on each and every element of the array without putting the loop of the array. So let's look at how this for each works. Let's say you have an array called nums. Now let's say you have to multiply each element by 2 and print it. Typically, you will write a for loop for it. Instead of it, you can write a higher order function, nums dot for each. So this higher order function takes a function as an argument, a callback function. So either you can provide that callback function. So or you can write that function here itself. So the callback function I'm writing here itself, function. It will call this function with each and every element. So that element will be available as the first parameter in this callback function. So let's say EL, or you can give anything. So now in this function, you already have that element. You can use that element. Now this is a general convention. People use EL for element or E for element so that it's easy and universal to read. You can provide any parameter, it doesn't matter. So what does for each callback function does? For each callback function, picks this array, picks each one element starting from the first one and pass it to this function. So you don't have to write any loops. First it will pass 1, it will be available as a parameter EL, then it will pass 2, then it will pass 3, 4 and 5. Now if you run this piece of code, you can see each of the number it is printing by doubling it. Now instead of writing the function here itself, if you have a already defined function, let's say I have an array of strings with 4 names dot for each. You can use any predefined function as a callback function for this. Now you can say I'm just providing it to run the function hello. So what happens now is for each of this name, which is A, B, C, D, E, it is passed, the A is passed as a variable or a parameter to this hello function. So what are the callback function you provided? So now you can see, run this thing, it prints hello A, B, C, D, E. But when you're passing a callback function to the for each, it expects at least one parameter. and that parameter, the first parameter, it will automatically pass what are the element value. So in which it is operating on. So when it's operating on B, it passes the value B. So we can see, we can start reusing these functions. So that's what higher order function do. And this for each, what is it doing? It is operating on each of it. So that's why it for represent, let's say there are 4 elements. It is operating or executing a callback function once for each element. Now, the next higher order functions we're going to look at is called map. So what does map does? Map is very similar to for each, but how does map operates? So first, map will create a new empty array. It will call a callback function with each element of the given array, and whatever that function returns, it keeps on storing it in a new array. So finally, the new array will have the same number of elements as that of the initial array. Now, let's say you have the numbers. Let's say you have a function called square. So what does this function does? It returns the square of an element. Okay. Now you can see when you are using a map, it will return a new array names dot map. Calling this callback function once for each of this element. So nums. So it picks up this numbers array. It calls these callback functions with each of every element of that array, and whatever that callback function gives you, it will keep storing in a new array, keeps pushing in a new array. So the final array will have the same number of elements as the initial array, and the elements of that array is nothing but the square of each of this element in the same order. Now, if you see what this map does, console.log squares. I can see it returns a new array with the squares of each of the elements 1, 4, 9, 16, 25. Okay. Now you can also use this for strings, whatever the thing which you do. So let's say where beautify. So I'm just taking a string, adding some stars in the starting and ending, and returning it. Now you can see that I'm applying this callback function on names. So we are names equal to names 25 names dot map 25. So now for each of this name, this function is called with and whatever that it returns, it is stored in the beauty names. I can see when you run this will have this names changed to this. So whenever you want to run certain function on an array and store those things in an output array, so their map can be used. Again, repeating, for each will not return an array, it executes a function on an array, whereas map will create a new array and keeps giving the same length array. Now, the next set of function, higher order function we are going to look at is called filter. So what does filter does? So filter creates a new array. With each element, it will call a function. If that function returns true, then it is added to the newly created array. If that function returns false, it is not added to the newly created array. So it is filtering out some of the elements based on whatever the criteria you provide. Again, the callback function which you use in filter should return true or false. So when you look at the final array which you get, it can have either 0 elements, that means no element past the condition, or it can have any number of elements till the length of the array. That means it can have anywhere between 0 to the length of the array elements, based upon how many elements are passing that criteria of the callback. Now, in this scenario, what we are going to do is, we are going to write a callback function, which is testing if a number is odd or not. So what does this function does? So it will check, or I'll just directly return element mod 2 is equal to 1. That means if the number is odd, I'm returning true. The number is even, I'm returning false. The checking modulus of that number divided by 2 is equal to 1. So if it's odd, it will give true. If it's even, it will give false. Now, where odd nums. So for the given array, you do the filter. What's the callback you are going to use? You are going to use is odd. Now, if you print the odd numbers that are returned, you can see only 1, 3, 5 are remaining from the original array. Why? 2 and 4 didn't pass this condition, right? In the case of 2 and 4, this function is or returns false. So they are not added to the final array. So it is filtering out some of the things. Now the final callback function which we are going to look today is something called reduce. So what does reduce does? It executes a callback function on each and every element, but it also starts accumulating it. That means whatever the things which you want to do, let's say many of the times when you are working with arrays, you want a single output based upon combining all those elements. So you are reducing the whole array to a single value. It can be anything. Let's say in the case of name string, it can be combining all the strings. In the case of numbers, maybe you are doing a sum of all the numbers. So the reducer function will be called once for each element of the array, and it's accumulating that value. So it needs two parameters. The first one is what is the value of that accumulator. The second is the element itself. Now, let's say you want to do the sum. Okay. So you have accumulator and the element. I'm just returning here. Okay. Now, when you look at this reduce callback function or reduce higher order function, I'm going to provide the sum as a callback function. So you can see total is equal to nums dot reduce. So what is the callback function? I have to use sum. So it starts with an accumulator. Because you are not providing any initial value to that accumulator, it takes the first element as the initial value of that accumulator and it runs from the second element. Okay. Now, let me first show it to you what the output is. You can see, run this, we get 15. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 is 15. Now let's quite closely look how this is working. If you do console.log, the value of AC, which is accumulator, you can give any variable names. It's not, but it's a general convention, people use that. Again, because you haven't provided any initial value, the first value of the element of the array makes as the initial accumulator and it runs from the second element. Now, if you run this, you can see initially the accumulator is 1 and starting from the second element. So it runs 1, 2, 3, 4 times because it already considered the first value as the initial value. If you want to provide an initial value, you can also do that. Then it will start accumulator with that particular value So here you can clearly see this function is being run 1, 2, 3, 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if you want to provide some initial value for this accumulator, you can provide it. Let's say I want to start the sum with 100. Now it will start the accumulator value with 100 and will start with the first element. It will start running the first element. You can see accumulator is 100. You can see the clear difference. Here it is starting with second element because it took the first element as the starting value of the accumulator. So here you are passing, reducing, starting with 100. So you can see accumulator is 100 and the total final value is 115. Again, based upon your use case, if you want to provide any starting value, you can also provide it. Now the final section of this higher order functions. One of the things which you can do with these higher order functions is you can also join them. It's also called chaining. Let's say you have a square function. Let's say for square nums, we can do nums dot map square, right? Now after doing the square, you want to get only the odd numbers. Then you already have a function called isodd. You already have something called filter. You can start joining those things. Dot isodd. Now you can see first it squares all the numbers, then it filter out the odd numbers of their squares. So if you print it, you can see instead of the first map will return nothing but 1, 4, 9, 16, 25. After that, you are filtering it with this function called isodd. Now you can see you get only 1, 9, 25. Now the beauty of this is you can join any number of these higher order functions. So let's say after doing all the things, I want to find the sum. Then you can directly use reduce to sum. Now you can see the total is 35. So just comment out these things. The total is 35. First, it squared all the numbers, then it filtered out the odds, then it made the final call of reduce with sum. So you can see 1 plus 9 plus 25 is 35. So let's say you have the predefined functions and you want to use them with an arrays. You can see how higher order functions makes it really useful, make the code much more compact and much more extensible. So let's say if you want to change, instead of squares, you want to find the cubes. So just you need to change this function. The all other problem statement remains the same. And you can get the output. Again, just a quick recap. For each, we'll run that function on each of that element. The map will run that function on each element, creates a new array, push them to a new array, and give that final resulting array. The filter we run that function on each element, picks that element only if that filter function returns true. Otherwise, it discards them and adds it to a new array and returns that array. Reduce will create a single output out of the array by combining them with whatever the function you want to combine them with. Again, these are very powerful in terms of making the code much more simpler and much more flexible. Also, we looked at callback functions. It is nothing but the functions you are providing as a parameter and calling at a later point of time.